All right, so that soft-edged eraser that I ended with, if I look in my history, I'll show you. It looked like that before, and then soft-edged eraser, starts kind of scooping this out, right? But I want to be careful not to go too deep, right, into content I want to keep. So all I'm really using that 100% soft-edged eraser for is to soften that hard edge that was first created by my lasso. So scoop that out. So under the brush, you want, the soft, round, pressure-sized brush. But you can turn that into a hard, round, pressure-sized brush just by playing with that hardness slider. But we want it at 0 right now. And then you choose the size right above it. So it's this drop down next to that dot with the pixel count underneath. So we'll be using that a lot. You can also find that under brush settings here. But I like to, it's just always there when you use a tool that has brush. Okay. Instead of continuing to clean this up, I'm going to keep color correcting, right? But now I have at least more of that sky showing. My next layer is this one, right? And before I use my 100% opacity soft-edged eraser to start blending it like that, I want to play with the color and lighting correction. So which one do I start with? They're up on the board. Levels. So I go to Image Adjustment, Levels. And I'm going to play with that mid-tone slider. I definitely don't want to go darker. I do want to go a little bit brighter. One of my favorite things about digital is that you can see the options. That's a big advantage on traditional work. Because I could think I need a painting to go lighter, and then I have to do it and then see it and go, oh no, I really didn't want that. Right? But here you can see the options before you finalize it. So I don't need too much change to my levels here. So I'm just going to hover maybe a little bit brighter as I come into the foreground. Now I go to Image Adjustment, Color Balance. This is the magic one. This one really matters. And I start with midtones. I'm not worried about this band of sky. That's all going to go away. I'm worried about these rocks blending with kind of the colors of the sky. So I'm going to push it maybe a little bit more red and yellow in the midtones. And then in the highlights, maybe a little bit more blue and cyan. And then in the shadows, and this, you'll just get better at this with practice. A little bit towards red. Actually, no, maybe away from red. And a little bit towards blue. And about there. So remember, you can always see in history what this has done. So it started that way. This was levels, brightened it a little bit. Then color balance got me that color and contrast back. And then the last one is Image Adjustments, Hue Saturation. And this is for big color shifts. You don't usually need them to be big. I'm going to push it just a little bit to the left. And then the intensity of the color. And I'm going to leave it pretty intense, maybe even intensify it a tiny bit because we're getting into the foreground here. All right. Now I can use that soft-edged eraser at 100% opacity. And this is with my trackpad, but I can do the same thing with my tablet. And I just want to obliterate that hard edge before I do anything else. It's okay to have a little bit of a glow around your horizon at this point. All right. Now I'm going to show you the next technique. I'll kind of build these as we go. For blending, once you've gotten rid of that hard edge, right, from that to this, now I can go to a lower opacity blending eraser. And because I have a much narrower space, right, I have reflective water here. This is now my coastline for that reflected water. I want to go to a much smaller size. So now when I use it at 40% opacity, it's going to leave some of those pixels behind. This is quite a lot to erase. And that's why you don't need to do all this as you go, because a lot of this is going to get covered up by layers still to come. But I'm just showing you, once you've gotten rid of the hard edge, then you can do lower opacity and blend the two together so that the colors from both layers kind of come through. See that? But the big problem is, if I go too far, right, then I'm also cutting through actual pixels that are solid. So I'll teach you further techniques as we go, as needed. Okay, so now the next layer, I'm going to hit Command S, just save it. Color balance, well, is going to help a lot, but before I can do color balance, because this is very warm, this is much cooler, I need to do levels first. So the lights. So adjustments, levels, mid-tone slider. Do I want it to go, whoops, wrong layer. But it might not be a bad thing to brighten up that middle. Okay, so you can do these as many times as you want. So you can run through all three and then go through them again if you want. But now I'm on this layer. I'm going to play with that mid-tone slider. Do I want them to go brighter or darker? I think actually brighter, because I need it to start looking like we're in the middle ground with more contrast. Now, color balance, because it's very warm, this will make a big difference. I want to push those midtones away from the yellow. You see how it's already starting to match the stone a little bit more. Away from the red. And then when you're not sure, just push it both ways and see. Now the highlights, maybe I can bring back a little bit of that warmth. Then the shadows, put it back in the cools. Now that shadow slider is so strong. So what's the difference? This is what it was like. That was levels, that's color balance. Okay, now hue saturation. Sometimes very helpful, sometimes not very necessary, but I want you to get used to how it works. Make sure you're adjusting the right layer. I can just shift that tree different ways. And then I can intensify it. There we go. And then, what's my next step? Well, I could take my soft-edged eraser at 100% opacity, right? And get rid of this hard edge around it. But because this was just photographed against the sky, I'm going to teach you another tool. And we've learned this tool before a little bit. This is called the magic wand. So before we learned to use the lasso to like find things, select around and then hit delete. The magic wand selects pixels that are matching each other. And the tool setting for the magic wand that you always want it to be this option. So that's the singular selection setting, which means if you have one selection, you can only have one selection at a time. So if you select something else, you'll lose the first selection, right? And if you want to add to it, you hold down Shift. If you want to subtract from it, you hold down Option. So that's the most versatile. So the other setting is you want contiguous for what I'm showing you here. Contiguous means that the pixels have to be touching each other and similar in order to be selected, because I'm trying to just select these background pixels. And then the tolerance means how close do they need to be similar. The default in Photoshop is 32. The default that we had in Photopea was 16. So 16 is within 1/6 of each other. This is within 1/3 of each other. It's not really clear what that means, but basically if it's not selecting enough pixels, you can up the tolerance. If it's selecting too many, you can lower the tolerance. And as long as you have anti-alias, you always want to keep that. That's going to be smoother selections. And then contiguous, when I click on this white, it will click on all of those white pixels that are touching. And even if there are whites in the eyes of the tree, it won't select those because those aren't touching where I clicked to select. And then notice it didn't get rid of these because those aren't touching these ones. Now I can try to just hit delete like we did before, but that's going to be really harsh. Because what a magic wand does and what a lasso does is it has to cut right between pixels. And when it does that, it gets very stair-steppy, and that doesn't look all that great. So instead, a nice technique is to use your selection as a mask. Not a clipping mask, we're doing this all directly, but it's the way you can get the advantages of a clipping mask right within a selection. So now that only those pixels are selected, when I use my 100% opacity soft-edged large eraser, right, it will only delete from that selection. Now, how is that different than using delete? Well, because you're using a soft-edged eraser, it will leave a little bit of a halo on that edge. So it's a little bit softer. And it can always be selected again. Now, the problem with using the magic wand is that this happens. You'll get little debris, right? Little fragments, which is not what you wanted. But most of this looks pretty good. And then it cut a little bit too much from there. So I'm going to show you a fun technique. Now, if we take our lasso, I'm going to cut the top of this tree to my own desired shape. Give it a little haircut. Hit delete. That's pretty harsh, especially because of that highlight that I left in with my eraser. But if I use the tool option for the lasso, which we haven't done before, you'll see that there's a feather option. You want to keep all the selection stuff the same, but under feather, as I get into the middle ground, maybe I want a 1 pixel or 2 pixel feather. What that means is it will soften the selection. And it will gradate it across 2 pixels. So now if I zoom in and show this to you, we're zoomed in a lot. I'm at 800% here. But you'll see what it does to the pixel edge. I delete, and it softens it, but doesn't get rid of it completely. Then I delete again, and it will keep biting away, even beyond the selection. So that's called feathering. Now, a really advanced technique is to use the magic wand, select all this empty space around it, right? Hold down Shift, try to select it all this empty space, everywhere. And if you feel like it's too harsh, instead of feather as an option, you see that isn't an option for the magic wand. Once you have a selection active, you go to select and mask. And this will allow you to feather your magic wand selections. And I recommend you use settings similar to these, and you click it to remember the settings. So that every time you say select and mask, it will remember this. So you don't have to set it up each time. So I have a radius of 2 pixels. It's just like a 2 pixel feather. I have smooth at 0 because I don't want it to automatically smooth anything. I have my feather at 2.9 pixels. That's because it's within a 2 pixel radius. So it basically does the same thing. And then I've shifted my edge. I'm growing my edge by about 10%. So those are my settings. I say okay. The selection looks the same, but now it's shifted the edge in by about 10%. This is to catch any of that little debris. And then when I hit delete, it feathers it. See, and bites away at it. And I'm zoomed in at 1600% right now. So this is pretty fine-tuned softening. But now that edge looks a lot more believable. This is a good way to deal with these little halos you sometimes get in content, right? So you can select it with the magic wand, and then you can use your lasso to subtract away from it. Okay, I don't want that selected. I don't want this chunk to go away. So option, not that. And then I can go to my magic wand, select and mask. You can also see select and mask isn't